The Trump administration is not backing down on its strategy of lethal but legally questionable strikes on suspected drug trafficking vessels, even amid all the scrutiny surrounding the double tap strike on a boat back in September, with some lawmakers still wanting more clarification and answers from the Pentagon. Yesterday, the Defense Department announced it carried out another lethal strike on a suspected vessel in the Eastern Pacific, killing 4 so-called narco-terrorists on board. Like all the other strikes, the administration did not provide any evidence that this boat was carrying illegal drugs or any details about the individuals killed. It comes after top military officials briefed a select group of lawmakers yesterday, showing them video of a second strike the U.S. military carried out against an alleged drug cartel vessel in September, after the first strike took out the boat but failed to kill everyone on board. The briefing satisfying some members, not others.
I am not questioning how our armed forces are carrying out their orders. I'm questioning why the administration is engaging in this campaign and whether this is justified.
I'm going to say what the video was very troubling, and I think more people need to see it. But I want to better understand process, justification, and some of the items. I had a checklist of items that I want to see that I think many of my colleagues have asked for as well.
As the White House doubles down on using wartime tactics without a war authorization, last night the White House unveiling its national security strategy outlining this administration's foreign policy doctrine. In the 33-page document, the White House called for a readjustment of the U.S. global military presence in the Western Hemisphere, saying a more suitable Coast Guard and Navy presence is needed to thwart illegal and unwanted migration and reduce human and drug trafficking. The document was also highly critical of traditional allies in Europe and called for the expeditious end to the war in Ukraine. Joining me now, NBC News senior national security correspondent Courtney Kube and NBC News senior White House correspondent Garrett Haake. Thanks to both of you for starting us off. Courtney, let me start with you. You were all over Capitol Hill yesterday talking to the lawmakers who were briefed. Before we get to the briefings, I just want to ask you about this breaking news overnight. The fact that the Pentagon, the defense secretary, basically doubling down on this strategy and ordered yet another strike overnight. What do you know about it?
Literally announcing it as Admiral Bradley, the head of SOCOM, Special Operations Command, and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs were leaving the Hill after briefing all day behind closed door. The Secretary of Defense and U.S. Southern Command putting out a posting on social media that there was yet another strike. 4 people were killed, this time in the Eastern Pacific. The reality is this just shows exactly what we're hearing from administration officials, particularly at the Pentagon, and that is they have no intention of stopping these strikes. They believe that they are fully legal and lawful, and they are not going to slow down. The reality is, though, yesterday's briefings were about the September 2nd strike, but there is a larger issue here and a larger theme that we keep hearing from these lawmakers as well, and that is the legality or questionable legality of the strikes overall.
Yeah, and I think that's going to continue to be in focus, Courtney. There's no doubt about that. And you were pressing all of these lawmakers who were in these very select briefings. And one thing that stood out to me, you and I have kind of been talking about this, the fact that we heard such different reactions from the lawmakers, and it really seemed to come down along party lines. What did you make of it? What did you hear?
And it wasn't just the reactions to things like, was this a war crime? Are these legal or illegal? It was facts about what they saw in the video. So each one of them, they watched the full video. Both General Kane and primarily Admiral Bradley walked them through what they were seeing at the time, and yet they came out, again, completely down the aisle. One side came out saying that the strikes were illegal and unlawful and that these certain things happened, and the other side saying the other. So it just shows that this entire story has been very difficult. There's very little transparency out of the Pentagon and the military about it. And because these briefings were behind closed doors in a classified setting, all we're getting is what the lawmakers are telling us.
One of the aspects of all of this, Courtney, that stands out to me, this is one of the first times that we're really seeing oversight, robust oversight by Congress of this administration. And to the point that you were making earlier, the question really seems to revolve around, Does the president need to go to Congress if he wants to continue this? Do you have a sense, based on your conversations with those lawmakers yesterday, that that's still a live ball? Are they going to continue to press that issue?
Yes, they absolutely are. And so the question is, will there need to be an authorization of use of military force? People aren't talking about that quite as much, but there is more momentum for a possible war powers resolution here. And I think what would definitely put that over is if we hear more talk and more movement about possible strikes on land. So not just the boat strikes in international waters, but actual strikes inside Venezuela, in a sovereign nation. That is what seems to be what would trigger especially a war powers resolution.
And of course, President Trump signaling that that could in fact be what we see next. Courtney, Kube, thanks for joining us after a big and very busy week. We really appreciate it. Great to have you here. Garrett, let me turn to you outside of a snow-covered White House. Let's talk about what I was just discussing with Courtney, and I want to start where we started the conversation, which is the fact that Secretary Haake ordered yet another strike. Do you have the sense that the White House backs this strategy completely? Is there any daylight, Garrett, between the White House and the Defense Secretary?
Not at this moment, Kristen. I mean, this is sort of classic Trump going back through his campaigns to never admit weakness, never admit the challenges to your argument, and when pressed, press back even harder. Here you have a White House who is convinced, or at least is saying publicly that they are convinced, the strikes that they are pursuing are legal, and that they're going to pursue them to the maximum strategy, the maximum amount possible every day if they can. It presents a situation where ultimately the president is the decider here. Haake is the tool implementing that policy. And this is something that Haake seems to have learned well going back to his confirmation hearings, where the White House made clear they wanted to see him fight. As long as he is out there aggressively pursuing the policy that is, candidly, kind of the only Trump administration foreign policy with any motion to it right now, when you consider these Ukraine talks have been outsourced to, outside aides. This is sort of the only game in town. And if Haake is pursuing it aggressively, he's likely to continue to have the backing of this White House.
Well, let me follow up with you on that, Garrett, because we did hear President Trump give his backing to Secretary Haake. And at the start of this administration, you and I had reporting on what was being referred to as a no scalps policy. It seems like that's still in place, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, in terms of cabinet officials being pushed out, I think that's absolutely the case. The administration is loath to be seen to bow to pressure from the outside, be it pressure from Congress, Democrats, from the media. When someone gets pushed out, they tend to get pushed up. Take, for example, Mike Waltz, who was kind of the, original sin in the Signalgate operation, ended up as a, Senate-confirmed ambassador to the United Nations. Other officials who have either left of their own accord, just simply saying they're leaving, or have become, nominees to be ambassadors or given other roles. The idea that Haake would be pushed out abruptly or in some kind of ugly way during the pressure campaign is anathema to Susie Wiles, President Trump, and the folks who run this White House.
Yeah, such great context, Garrett. Let me ask you, because we also saw President Trump today receive the FIFA Peace Prize, a symbolic gesture. He was pressed on whether this runs counter to all of this military action he's been taking in the Caribbean. How did he respond to that? What's the line from the White House and from the president?
Tying himself into a bit of a rhetorical knot here, suggesting that the actions he's taking in the Caribbean are about peace and about, protecting this country. They're not in some way about violence. I suppose you could argue that since this isn't a war, the same argument that's being used against it, that he's not, breaking some kind of peace vow here. But it goes to show the challenges that this administration has to sell President Trump and the America First agenda as this peace president, but also running this unprecedented bombing campaign in Latin America.
All right, Garrett Haake, thank you so much for joining us. Great reporting, as always, after a very busy news week. We really appreciate it.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.